Is that a leg or a clearance sale from the VA? One man laughed as the Marine limped past Gate 22, her prosthetic clicking softly beneath faded cargo pants. Another called out, "Wrong terminal, sweetheart. Veterans Beg over there." The airport echoed with cruel laughter. She said nothing, just gripped her cap tighter and kept walking. What they didn't know, she once dragged 3 men through a firefight with half her leg left in the dirt. 15 minutes later, the laughter stopped. 4 black SUVs rolled up. 7 Navy SEALs stepped out, and when they formed a silent circle around her, saluting in unison, the entire terminal learned what real honor looked like. The overhead speaker crackled with another boarding announcement, but Ava Monroe didn't flinch. She sat in the hard plastic chair near Gate 22, her spine straight, shoulders relaxed in a way that only came from years of learning how to endure discomfort without complaint. A steady rhythm of footsteps and suitcase wheels echoed through Houston International, but Ava was still, unmoved by the buzz around her. Her prosthetic leg, matte black and scuffed from use, was visible beneath faded cargo pants. Most didn't notice. Some did and looked away. A few stared for half a second too long before quickly pretending they hadn't. Ava noticed, always. She just didn't react. Her left hand rested on a canvas duffel, Marine issue, worn at the corners, stitched carefully where it had once torn near the zipper. In her right hand, she held a sun-faded Marine Corps cap, its edges softened from years of use and travel. She wasn't wearing it. She rarely did anymore, but she never flew without it. Gate 22 was crowded, like most gates at noon, filled with business travelers tapping away on laptops, families juggling juice boxes and iPads, couples whispering about upgrades and connections. Ava didn't belong to any group. She was alone. That was how she preferred it. Alone meant quiet. Alone meant no questions, no assumptions, no forced small talk about what happened. She had stopped answering that years ago. Outside the wide airport windows, the tarmac shimmered beneath the midday sun. Planes taxied, baggage carts weaved between jet bridges. But inside, Ava's world was silent. Her breathing was even, trained. Her eyes scanned casually, but missed nothing. She had spent years learning how to read a room in seconds, an instinct forged not in meeting rooms but in deserts and war zones. A child passed by with his mother tugging her sleeve. "Mom, what's wrong with her leg?" he asked, voice high and clear. The mother hushed him, embarrassed. Ava said nothing. She'd heard worse. She adjusted the cap in her hands and kept her eyes on the monitor overhead. Flight 762 to San Diego. Delayed. 45 minutes. She exhaled slowly, settled deeper into the chair, and waited. She didn't mind waiting. Waiting had never bothered her. What came after, that was what mattered. The rustle of boarding passes and the quiet drone of airport announcements were briefly drowned out by a burst of laughter, sharp, forced, and far too close. Ava Monroe didn't turn her head. She didn't need to. The tone told her everything. It was the same kind of laughter she'd heard too many times since returning home. Mockery wearing the mask of humor, aimed not to entertain but to belittle. "Dude, check it out," one of them said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Looks like someone lost a leg and found a free ride." The words came from behind her, just a row over. Ava didn't flinch. She kept her gaze fixed on the arrival board. Her fingers, though, curled slightly tighter around the brim of her Marine cap. Another voice chimed in, younger, cockier. "Bet she gets to cut the line, too. All those sweet veteran benefits, government charity at work." More laughter. Loud, careless. It carried across the terminal like oil on water. A few people glanced up from their phones, eyes flickering between the men and Ava. No one said a word. One of them exaggerated a limp as he walked past to throw away a coffee cup, dragging one leg behind him in parody. "Oorah," he muttered under his breath with a smirk, just loud enough for Ava and everyone else to hear. The other snorted so hard he spilled some of his drink. Ava's jaw locked. Her throat was tight, but not from shame, from control. From discipline honed in 1,000 moments just like this. She'd taken shrapnel to the ribs and still held formation. This was noise, weakness hiding behind a suit and tie. She didn't owe them anger, she didn't owe them anything. She kept her posture straight, her face neutral. Inside, though, there was movement, like a tremor rolling beneath solid ground. Not rage, not even sadness. Just the low, ancient hum of fatigue that came from carrying weight others would never understand. She shifted slightly in her seat, not away from them but towards the window. The sun caught the edge of her cap, casting a faint shadow across her lap. She looked out across the tarmac, her reflection faint in the glass. Still there. Still standing, even while sitting. And still not broken. The laughter faded, but its echo lingered in the air like the bitter smell of burned coffee, unwelcome and clinging. Conversations that had once buzzed in low hums around Gate 22 dimmed. Nearby passengers shifted in their seats. Some pretended to be engrossed in their screens, others glanced sideways with a mix of discomfort and guilt, but no one said anything. Not to the two men still chuckling under their breath. Not to Ava. The silence was not noble. It was complicit. An airport worker pushing a cart of plastic-wrapped sandwiches paused near the edge of the terminal seating. She looked up, eyes flicking between Ava and the suits. For a moment, it seemed she might speak, but then her gaze dropped, and she pushed the cart forward without a word. Another safe choice made in a world built on them. Ava Monroe exhaled through her nose. Her fingers loosened on the brim of her marine cap. She slid it into her duffel, stood slowly, and adjusted the strap over her shoulder. Her movement was deliberate, not rushed, not apologetic. Her prosthetic leg clicked softly as she took her first step. The sound, faint and rhythmic, marked her progress like a slow drumbeat. She walked with measured grace, each step uneven but unbroken. Her shoulders stayed level, her head remained high. And though her gait was not the same as it had been years ago, her presence carried the same weight, the quiet command of someone who had led through fire. She passed the mocking men without a glance, as if their words hadn't touched her at all. That, more than any confrontation, seemed to unsettle them. Their smirks faltered just slightly. Near the edge of the terminal seating, a boy, maybe 8 or 9, stood beside his mother. He wore a red hoodie too big for him, the sleeves frayed at the ends. His eyes tracked Ava as she passed, wide and steady. He didn't laugh. He didn't point. He just watched, as if memorizing the way she walked, the weight she carried, the silence she wore like armor. Ava disappeared into the corridor toward the restroom, the click of her prosthetic fading. The terminal remained hushed, like it was holding its breath. No one had stood up for her, but someone had noticed. Near the window, tucked into a shadowed corner between a vending machine and a row of potted palms, sat a man who hadn't moved in nearly 30 minutes. Sunglasses shielded his eyes despite the dim light inside the terminal. His posture was casual, legs crossed, arms resting lightly on the arms of his seat, but there was a tension in his stillness, like a coiled wire beneath a soft glove. He hadn't looked up when the laughter started. He didn't need to. He had already seen everything. In his right hand, low and discreet, a phone was angled just enough to capture the scene. The mocking voices, the limp parody, the cruel smirks. and Ava Monroe standing alone in a sea of strangers who chose silence over courage. As Ava disappeared down the corridor, the man's thumb stopped the recording. He paused a moment longer, staring at the blank screen. Then he pulled out a second phone. Black, unmarked, government-issued. No apps, no distractions, just a direct line. He dialed a number from memory. It rang once. "It's Monroe," he said quietly. "Gate 22. It's time." He didn't say his name. He didn't have to. But the voice on the other end asked anyway. "Are you sure?" The man's jaw flexed once. "She's still walking. Alone. Same way she carried half our unit. I'm done watching." A brief silence passed. Then came the response. "Understood. Mobilizing." He ended the call, placed the phone back into the inner pocket of his jacket, and leaned back in his chair. For the first time in the last hour, he allowed himself to exhale. Commander Reed Stanton hadn't come to the airport for a flight. He'd come because of a name on a veteran registry update. A cross-reference from a VA friend had confirmed it. Ava Monroe was flying today. He hadn't seen her since Kandahar, since the night smoke and blood and screaming filled the air and she pulled him from a twisted Humvee with half her leg gone and fire closing in from all sides. She had never asked for thanks, never even answered his letters. But today, Reed Stanton saw the world mocking her for what she'd lost saving others. And he wasn't going to stay quiet. Not this time. The sky over Kandahar had been a dull, burning gray, thick with dust and heat that clung to the skin like oil. Ava Monroe, 29 and already 2 deployments deep, moved through the chaos with the focus of someone who'd stopped thinking about fear months ago. There was no time for it. Not when lives hung in the balance and every decision was measured in heartbeats and blood. They'd been escorting a supply convoy through the Southern District when it happened. First the flash, then the roar, and then the world shattering into metal and flame. The lead vehicle was gone before the smoke even cleared, reduced to a twisted carcass of steel and screams. Gunfire crackled from the rooftops. Radio chatter went to static. Ava hit the dirt hard behind the tailgate of their Humvee, heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted out. "Contact left. RPG from the south building," someone yelled. But it was already too late. She didn't hesitate. Never had. Ava pushed off the sand and sprinted toward the wreckage, rounds kicking up dust inches from her boots. The first Marine she pulled out was dazed, a gash slicing across his scalp. The second screamed as she dragged him by his vest, his femur shattered, blood soaking the ground. The third was barely conscious, pinned beneath a sheared-off axle. His name was Stanton. Reed Stanton. His face pale, uniform soaked with diesel and blood. He looked at her through fogged eyes and croaked, "Don't leave." "I won't," she said, voice low, flat, certain. She lifted, pulled, screamed through clenched teeth as shrapnel bit her arm. Then the second blast came. The world flipped. Sound vanished. And in its place, a strange, muffled silence pressed in like water. Ava woke hours later in a hospital tent. One leg gone below the knee. The pain was sharp but distant. What stayed with her, what always stayed, was the silence. They gave her a silver star, a Purple Heart. Speeches were made, commendations written. But Ava never stood at the podium, never gave interviews. She didn't want parades or ceremonies. She just wanted to go home and be still. The hum of the airport droned on, indifferent, as travelers dragged suitcases past overpriced kiosks and scrolling departure boards. Outside, beneath a blinding Texas sun, the smooth rhythm of ordinary gave way to something far more deliberate. 4 black SUVs pulled up in tight formation at the curb outside Terminal C. No logos, No markings. Just tinted windows, polished exteriors, and the kind of silence that didn't ask for attention, it demanded it. The engines cut off in sync, doors opened, boots hit pavement. 7 men stepped out. They didn't speak, they didn't smile, they didn't need to. Dressed in fitted tactical black, pants tucked, shirts clean, movements crisp, they looked less like passengers and more like a team deploying. Some wore sunglasses. A few had visible tattoos curling down muscular forearms. All of them moved with purpose, not swagger. It was the kind of motion that only came from years of training layered over instinct. Clean, practiced, controlled. Airport security noticed immediately. 2 TSA agents looked up from their podiums, eyes narrowing. One reached for his radio. "Possible threat?" a supervisor asked, voice low but alert. Before an alarm could be raised, one of the men stepped forward and calmly flashed a federal ID. It wasn't waved or fumbled. It was presented, still and steady. "Department of Defense clearance," he said without pause. "Commander Reed Stanton, en route to secure federal personnel." The agents exchanged a glance. One started to protest, then caught the tone, the badge, the way every man behind Stanton stood like steel on standby. He nodded once and waved them through. They entered the terminal like shadows slipping beneath the noise. No announcement, no fanfare, just motion. Stanton led, jaw set, sunglasses reflecting overhead lights as he scanned the crowd. Gate 22 was already in view. He hadn't told them everything, only what mattered. "She saved me. We don't let people laugh at that." The others hadn't asked for more. They didn't need to. The boots moved quietly over polished floors, in step without trying. People turned to look, not because they were loud, but because the air changed when they arrived, like a storm rolling in just below the surface. And the storm was heading straight for Gate 22. The atmosphere at Gate 22 had shifted. Where there had been idle chatter and occasional glances at delayed flight boards, now there was tension. Subtle, electric, unmistakable. Passengers leaned back in their chairs, quieted by something they didn't quite understand. A ripple of awareness spread as the black-clad men moved into view, cutting through the crowd with precision and presence, their formation effortless but unmistakably deliberate. The 2 businessmen, still lounging in their seats, half laughing over something on one of their phones, didn't notice at first, but they felt it. The way light conversation had vanished, the way people stopped scrolling and started recording, the way silence rolled in like smoke before a burn. Commander Reed Stanton stepped forward, unhurried. He removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that held too many years and not enough mercy. He didn't look around, didn't address the crowd. He looked only at them, the men who had mocked her. "Which one of you thought it was funny?" His voice wasn't raised. It didn't have to be. Each word dropped like a lead weight in the quiet. The taller of the 2 straightened in his chair, blinking. "Excuse me?" Reed took another step. "You laughed at a Marine who gave more to this country than you've ever been asked to." He paused, letting the words breathe, letting them sink in. "Her name is Sergeant Ava Monroe. She pulled me out of a burning Humvee in Kandahar. I was unconscious, bleeding. She had half a leg left and still carried me through gunfire." The younger man opened his mouth but found nothing waiting inside it. "While you made jokes," Reed continued, calm as steel cooling in the forge, "she made sacrifices." Phones were out now. Passengers filming with shaking hands, uncertain whether they were witnessing a reprimand or the beginning of something larger. Security lingered at the edge, but didn't interfere. They knew. Everyone knew. Reed's gaze cut through the suits like wind through dry grass. "You don't have to respect what she did, but you damn well won't mock it in front of me." Neither man responded. Their laughter was gone, their smirks erased. All that remained was silence, and the weight of a truth too heavy to deny. The restroom door swung open with a quiet hush, and Ava Monroe stepped back into the terminal. She moved slowly, steadying the duffel on her shoulder, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Her prosthetic clicked softly beneath her with every step, a sound she no longer heard but always felt. The terminal was quieter than before, unnaturally so. She looked up. 7 men stood in formation, facing her directly. Still as stone, spaced evenly across the gate's concourse. No weapons, no words, just presence. Her steps faltered, only slightly. She froze at first, not in fear but confusion. A Marine's kind of pause, the kind that meant assess before you act. Her eyes moved from face to face. Tactical black, cropped cuts, the kind of posture that couldn't be faked. And then Reed Stanton. He stepped forward just one pace and stood at attention. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Then he raised his hand to his brow. It was slow, precise, textbook, the kind of salute taught in silence and remembered by the body long after sleep. His arm didn't waver, his eyes didn't flinch. And then, in perfect sequence, snap, 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 each of the 6 behind him followed. 7 salutes, 7 men standing as one. The sound was minimal, but the meaning thundered across the terminal. People watched. All of them. Phones lowered, screens dimmed. No one laughed, no one whispered. Reverence had replaced spectacle. Even the TSA agents near the gate had stopped, their radios silent, their hands behind their backs in quiet witness. Ava didn't move for a moment. Her duffel slipped from her shoulder and landed gently at her feet. Her hand rose, instinct more than thought, and she returned the salute, fingers sharp, chin high. Her eyes held firm, but something behind them flickered. Not weakness, not shame. Something older, earned. Reed dropped his salute slowly. The others followed in perfect rhythm. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just nodded once, a silent acknowledgement between warriors. Ava swallowed hard, the noise of the terminal distant, like wind behind glass. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a burden in uniform. She felt seen. By the time Ava Monroe's plane touched down in San Diego, her name had already circled the globe. Someone had posted the footage before the plane ever left the ground. It started as a short clip, a quiet Marine returning a salute from 7 Navy SEALs in the middle of a crowded airport terminal. No music, no filters, just raw silence wrapped in reverence. But it didn't need production. The moment spoke for itself. Within hours, hashtags began trending. Hashtag honor her. Stand with Ava. By morning, the story had been picked up by every major outlet. Decorated, Marine mocked at airport. SEALs respond with silent salute. It was on cable news loops, morning shows, veteran forums. Even late-night hosts, normally steeped in satire, shared the video without a punchline. It had become untouchable, because truth, when caught off guard, has a gravity that can't be denied. The 2 businessmen, the ones who had laughed, limped, and joked, were identified within hours. Their company issued a swift statement. We do not tolerate disrespect, especially toward those who have served. By noon, both men were gone. Their desks cleared, their names trending for all the wrong reasons. But that wasn't the part Ava remembered. What she remembered came in the form of an envelope, hand-addressed, tucked between credit card offers and VA flyers in her mailbox 3 days later. The handwriting was crooked, the stamp slightly off-center. Inside was a single sheet of paper, lined and smudged at the corners. It was a drawing, A stick figure in a cap stood tall, one leg drawn carefully as a metal line. Around it, 7 others stood in formation, saluting. Above them, scrawled in bright red crayon, "My hero." There was no return address, but she didn't need one. She remembered the boy. Red hoodie, wide eyes, silent awe. She hadn't known then that he was watching closely enough to see everything. She held the paper in both hands for a long time. It didn't carry weight like a medal, it didn't shine like silver or brass, but somehow it felt heavier than anything the government had ever placed in her palm. Because this time, it didn't come from duty. It came from understanding. The airport never truly changed. Announcements still echoed overhead, babies still cried somewhere near baggage claim, and overpriced coffee remained as bitter as ever. But something near Gate 22 had shifted. Not in noise, not in layout, but in tone. The air there felt different. Not somber, not heavy, just quieter in a meaningful way. A kind of stillness people didn't talk about but instinctively respected. The plaque had gone in without ceremony. No ribbon cutting, no press conference. Just a quiet morning, early enough that the terminal hadn't yet filled, when 2 maintenance workers knelt beside the window and drilled 4 stainless steel bolts into the wall. When they stood back, it was there. Unassuming, simple, undeniable. In honor of Sergeant Ava Monroe, Marine, hero, survivor. The metal was brushed bronze, the lettering clean and unadorned. It wasn't flashy, it didn't need to be. The location spoke louder than design. It sat at eye level, just beside the gate seating, where travelers lined up and waited for boarding calls. It greeted everyone who passed through, not with demand, but presence. Some people missed it entirely. They had flights to catch, earbuds in, minds elsewhere. But others saw it. A man paused mid-step, suitcase in hand, just to run his fingers across the words. A woman in uniform stopped for a moment and stood straighter. A father lifted his daughter and pointed, whispering something only she could hear. And one afternoon, Ava came back. She walked slower this time, not from pain, from reflection. Her duffel was still slung over one shoulder, but it felt lighter now. She wore the same cap, the same cargo pants, but her posture had changed, not in height, something deeper, something rooted. As she approached the gate, people noticed, not the way they used to, not with curiosity or doubt. They noticed with understanding. A quiet man offered his seat without a word. A young woman across the aisle nodded once. A TSA agent stood a little taller. Ava glanced at the plaque. She didn't reach out. She didn't need to. She saw it. They all saw it. And for the first time in years, as she waited for her flight, she didn't feel invisible. She felt remembered.